All right, good afternoon, guys. It's the 1 o'clock session here with Mr. Ferko. So hopefully you're able to see me over there. Okay, there we go. Oh, I don't know what's going on here. All right, we're on the 1 o'clock session here. I don't have anyone in here yet. Okay, one person's coming in. If you want to say good afternoon or say your name. All right, afternoon. Wait for a few more people to come on in for today. This is the afternoon on respiratory system. That's what we'll be talking about for today. If you have any questions, you may ask them before we start. So I'll wait a few more minutes for a few more people to check on in. So we're going to talk about the respiratory system, and you had the digestive system from last week. So that's what you guys went over last week. Your projects were still getting turned in, so I'm still getting a few more. I've checked this morning after the live session. All right, so who do we have here? I believe is that you, Gus? I want to say it might be Gus. All right, good afternoon. If you have any questions, Gus, you might ask him. I think that's your name. I want to say that's your screen name on here. No, Vicente. I'm sorry. So Vicente. Any questions, Vicente, before we get started? What you're doing? We'll be doing a project this week on the respiratory system. So respiratory system will be for this upcoming week. All right, we're going to cover the respiratory system. Okay, now, all right, excellent. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So those are in here, Vicente and whoever else is in here, just sit back and listen. If you have any questions, just go ahead and type it in there. Okay, Gus. All right, it's Gus for there. Okay, Gus and Vicente. Gus, do you have any questions that you may need to ask before we get started on the respiratory system and or the digestive system project that was turned in on Friday? Did you guys turn your projects in? You still could turn them in. Okay. All right. Looks like we got Kyle. All right. Hi, Kyle. Any questions, Kyle or Gus, that are in here? Okay. No questions from Gus. What about you, Kyle? Any questions that you may have before we get started? Okay, no questions. Okay, excellent. All right, excellent job. Don't forget this project will be due this Friday on the respiratory system. I'll go over it towards the end, and then make sure you've turned in your other project on the digestive system and did the brain pops. Make sure you're doing the brain pops too. They are counting as grades too, so make sure you're doing both of those as well. And there'll be a brain pop for this upcoming week as well too. All right, I did get your project, Kyle. So good job. I don't think I've got Vicente or Gus's project for the digestive system. So make sure you get those turned in through email or Microsoft Teams. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on the respiratory system so you can sit back and listen to some things on here. And then I'll ask some questions to this. And if you have questions, you can answer and write them in the bar there, the space bar in the live chat. All right, the respiratory system. Well, what the respiratory system is the oxygen delivery system to your body. Okay. The respiratory system is a set of organs that allows a person to breathe and exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the body. The integrated system of the organs involved is the intake and exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the body and the environment, and including the nasal passages such as the larynx, trachea, bronchial tubes, and then lungs. Those are some of the main passages, those 5 parts there. The nasal passages, the larynx, trachea, bronchial tubes, and lungs. And we'll kind of talk about each of these organs too individually, go over their responsibilities and what they do as a function. Now, the respiratory system performs 2 major tasks. All right, the first one is called external respiration. That's the exchanging of air between the body and the outside and environment externally, taking in air from the outside, all right, into your body. And the other one's called internal respiration. So that's bringing oxygen into the cells and removing carbon dioxide back out. Okay, so those are the two, external and internal respiration. All right, any other questions so far? We got another question. Isabella, okay. All right, hi Isabella. Let's see. I'm still working on. Okay, I believe that was Gus. Okay, so if you're still working on that project, yeah, get it turned in as soon as you can. All right, so even if they're a little bit late, still get them in. I'm still giving you credit for them. So just keeping up with the work. I know this is a new way of learning online, so make sure you're getting them turned in. Okay. All right. So hi Isabella. Thank you for joining in. Any questions, Isabella? You can just type it in on the live chat bar there, if you which you have. So we're talking about the respiratory system for today. All right. All right. As I continue to go over some parts of the respiratory system, some of the main functions are the nose, the mouth. Those are the two ways air is coming in. All right. The trachea, the long tube, which we'll talk about for the goes along near the windpipe. The bronchial tubes that connect into our lungs, the lungs itself, and an area called the diaphragm that sits underneath the lungs. So we're going to talk about some of these main parts and main areas as well. All right, and I'll explain the project at the end. All right. Functions of the respiratory system. There's about 6 functions here. One, it supplies the body with oxygen and disposes carbon dioxide. Taking in oxygen, getting rid of carbon dioxide. It filters the inspired air when you take in air. Okay, it helps filter it. It produces sound, which we'll learn about an area of where our voice box is at. Okay. It contains receptors for smell. Okay, with your nose. All right, because that's part of the respiratory system, and it rids the body of some excess water and heat. Okay, through breathing. It helps regulate blood pH as well too. All right, now breathing has two cycles or phases, I should say. Breathing pulmonary ventilation is what they call it, consists of 2 cycle phases. The first one is called inhalation, taking in. It's called inspiration. It draws gases into the lungs. Okay. The other one's called exhalation. It's called expiration. It forces gases out. So when you inhale and you exhale, all right, so that's the exchange of gas, taking in the oxygen, getting rid of the carbon dioxide, all right, where the exchange takes place within the lungs. Okay, continuing on. Now, external respiration from the outside environment enters the nose or mouth through inspiration or exhalation, inhalation, okay, inhaling. And it's composed of the nose cavity, okay, your sinuses, your pharynx, which is your throat. We learned that in the digestive system. They kind of work together. The pharynx and in the digestive system and respiratory system kind of go together. And the larynx, which we're going to learn about today, which is like your voice box. We'll talk about that. So all parts of the conducting this portion of these are all part of the respiratory system. The nasal cavity, the pharynx, the nose, and the mouth. Okay, and that's all part of that's how we inspire and get that external respiration in. Those are some of the main parts there. All right. Any questions so far? Still working? Okay. Looks like okay, that's staying with Jaden. Okay, excellent. All right. Now, your nose is also called external nares. Okay, is divided into 2 halves or nasal septums. Okay, that's why we have 2, like nasal nostrils. Okay, that's what that means. All right, and it contains sinuses where air is warmed, and it also contains your nose contains cilia, which are responsible for filtering. They're little hairs that help that are responsible for filtering out foreign bodies as well. It's called cilia. Okay, you might have heard that name before as well. Okay. All right, the internal nares, okay, open to the exterior, and the external nares open into the throat where the pharynx is. Okay, so it provides an airway for respiration. It moistens and warms entering air. Okay, in your nose, like your nares. It filters and cleans inspired air, and it also helps for speech with talking, the voice box, and it detects odors in the airstream as well. Okay. Any other questions? So go ahead and make sure you can stop me at certain times here if you need to, as I check back and forth here. Now, the pharynx has common spaces that are used for the respiratory and digestive system. Remember, I was telling you the pharynx we studied with digestive last week, and it's also part of the respiratory for this in this body system as well. Like I said, it's commonly called the throat, is another name for it, and it originates the posterior nasal or oral cavities. All right, and it's the area is called where the larynx is and the esophagus goes to. Okay, so the pharynx is like your back of your throat. So it's a common pathway for air and food. So walls are lined by mucosa and contain skeletal muscles that are primarily used for swallowing. Okay, so we talked about that. Remember, we learned that with that was the peristalsis last week. And those were like in your windpipe to help push food down in esophagus. All right, so that's what that kind of works together with there. So again, these lateral walls are distendable and they force to swallow food into the esophagus. So they kind of help for that aspect there. Okay, and that's the pharynx is the name for it. All right. The pharynx is also has three sections to it. Okay. Um, we're not going to go into detail on that, but there's a nasal pharynx, the oropharynx is the middle part, and then the larynopharynx is where it goes to the larynx. So those are some of the areas. They're like the upper, middle, and lower parts of the pharynx, but we're not going to get too much into detail on that. So just know the pharynx is the back of your throat, and then the larynx, which is the next part where we're going to learn about, is the voice box. Okay, where we get the sound when we speak. Okay, so the voice box is short, somewhat cylindrical. All right, it's right here. All right, where it's located, your voice box. All right, and somewhere it actually is a somewhat cylindrical airway, and it ends in the trachea. And the trachea starts the tube going towards the lung. So it goes pharynx, larynx, trachea. Okay, in that order of breathing. So it prevents swallowed material from entering the lower respiratory tract, and it conducts air into the lower respiratory tract. And like I said, it helps produce sound. That's what the voice box does. It's your vocal cords in your voice box, so it produces sound. Um, it's supported by a framework of 9 pieces of cartilage, okay, that are held in place by ligaments and muscles. Okay, so that's what the larynx does. Now, the trachea is a flexible tube called a windpipe. There's another name for it as well. It's a flexible tube called the windpipe and extends through that area to the esophagus. All right. And there's cartilage rings that reinforce the rigidity of the trachea walls to ensure the trachea remains open at all time when you're breathing. Okay. That's what it's mainly for there. All right. Um, at the level of the angle of the trachea, there's two smaller tubes that are the right and left primary bronchi is how you say that. Bronchi looks it's B-R-O-N-C-H-I, bronchi, and they kind of go into these called bronchioles. Okay, they're like little tree branches that go into your lungs. So from the trachea, these little tree branches, they have a right and left part. They kind of spread in both areas, and that's where you're able to breathe that way too. Okay. Each primary bronchus projects laterally towards the lungs, like I was saying. So they kind of like spread toward the lung. All right. So that is the trachea there. Now, the next part, any other questions so far as I'm going back and forth here? All right. Any questions that you may have, please ask at any time. Okay. Now, talking about the lungs, okay? Each lung is conical shaped, okay, like a cone. That's what that means, conical shape. All right. And its wide concave base rests upon the muscular diaphragm. Its superior regions, called the apex, projects superiorly to the point that is slightly superior and posterior to the clavicle. So both lungs are bordered by the thoracic wall, all right, and it's supported by the rib cage. So your rib cage protects the lungs. Okay, toward the middle of the lungs is separated as well there too. All right, so and then there's a broader surface in contact with the thoracic wall, and that's the surface to the lung there too. So the lungs, the rib cage keep our lungs pretty much is the only thing you really got to know there and keep them protected. Now you have a right and left lung too, so you have two. Okay, your left lung is divided into two lobes. Okay, and they are actually smaller than the right lung. Okay, so your left lung is a little bit smaller than the right lung because of its cardiac notch accommodates the heart, because the heart would be right under that area there. Okay, your right lung, okay, is divided into three lobes, so it's located more superiorly to the body due to the liver on the right side. When the heart is like right over here, your heart, that's where the lung has, it's a little bit smaller on that. So two lobes to the left side of your lung, three on the right side of your lung. Okay. All right. So that's some facts there on the lungs. Okay. But let's get into some of the breathing and how the breathing is actually a factor into this whole system. So that's what respiration is. So we'll talk about that next. Okay. Any questions so far? I'm just going back and forth. I don't see anybody with any questions. So make sure if you do have anything, like I said, you could type anytime during the segment, and I'll be free to answer you ask any questions here. Oh, we got a little thunderstorm coming through here. That's why my lights seem a little bit low here. It's kind of got really dark. Hopefully, everyone's doing fine there too, not losing power or anything like that. Okay, how do the lungs work? Air enters the lungs through a system called the bronchi. Okay, that's like those tubes, like from the trachea, these little branches that branch into the lung called the bronchi. And the alveoli are where the most important connected with the blood stream. So covering each alveolus is a whole network of little vessels called capillaries, which help keep our circulation. That's why the respiratory system works really well with our cardiovascular system, and that'll be the next body system that we're going to study next week. Okay, so it is important that the air in the alveoli and the blood of the capillaries are very close together, so that oxygen and carbon dioxide can move or diffuse between them. So when you breathe in, all right, taking a breath in, air comes down the trachea through the bronchi to the alveoli. Then fresh air has lots of oxygen in it, and some of its oxygen will travel across walls of the alveoli into your bloodstream. So traveling in opposite directions is carbon dioxide, which crosses from the blood to blood in the capillaries into the air and the alveoli, and then is breathed out. Okay, so that's kind of like what happens. Carbon dioxide crosses from the bloodstream there, and then the air, and then is pushed back out. Okay, so that's where the gas exchange happens, pretty much in the alveoli within the lung. Okay, back through the bronchi, back through the trachea, and then out through your mouth, out and out. So this way, this brings your body the oxygen you need to live and to get rid of the waste product of carbon dioxide, like I said, out of your mouth. Okay. All right, the next part here with the lungs, like I was telling you about the bronchi and the bronchioles, those are the branches that reach into the lungs there, and that's where those capillary beds of the alveoli sit on there, and that's where it's kind of connected to the pulmonary and vein and pulmonary artery. So that's kind of how it's going to go into your cardiovascular system, which is the heart, which we'll learn about there too. Okay. Now, for breathing, lungs are sealed in pleural membranes inside the chest cavity. So they have an area called a pleural cavity that kind of protects them. Okay. And at the bottom of the cavity is a large flat muscle known as the diaphragm, which sits underneath your rib cage. Okay. So when you breathe, this kind of goes up and down your diaphragm. It's a muscle that helps for breathing there. Okay. So during inhalation, breathing in, the diaphragm contracts and the rib cage rises up. So this is expanding the volume of the chest cavity. So it expands the volume of the chest cavity, like fills up. Okay, the chest cavity is sealed, and this creates a partial vacuum inside the cavity. So the atmospheric pressure fills the lungs, and air rushes into the breathing passages. So that's during inhalation, with taking that in, inhaling. Okay, where that chest cavity rises up. So often exhaling is a passive event. When you exhale, comes out, the rib cage lowers and the diaphragm relaxes. And the pressure in the chest cavity is greater than the atmospheric pressure. So air is then pushed out of the lungs, okay, from when you relax it. All right, that's where it's relaxed. When you take it in, it goes up, push it out, it goes down that diaphragm. That's how that works there. Okay, so that's another organ for the respiratory system. All right, so those are some of the basics right now that I have on the respiratory system and some of their parts and their functions there. I'm going to go ahead and explain the project here and your assignments for this week. If you have any questions, please ask anytime during this. Okay, um, so make sure this is the time to ask that what some of the basics that you may have. All right, 1 second, guys. Okay. Okay. And I'll probably ask you guys some questions during this here too, and talk about some of these functions, which I'll be putting up on Microsoft Teams too. So make sure you do check that to find out some of your assignments for this week. Okay, there is a video for today, the one with Mr. Canelo and I in it, talking about the respiratory system and kind of explaining what to do. It's a two-part assignment along with the brain pop. Okay, so I'll go ahead and talk about the assignment here now. And then I'll open it up to you guys if you have any questions or comments or anything like that. Um, the respiratory system, you are to draw a diagram of the respiratory system, labeling the parts, the main functions. There's about 8 to 10 parts that are main functions of the respiratory system. Okay, so your nose, your mouth, the trachea, the bronchial tubes, the lungs, the diaphragm. Those are all important ones within that part there. Okay, so those are just some of the basic ones there. So you are to draw them, find a diagram, label them, and just write what they do. Give me the functions. Tell me what the trachea does. Tell me what the diaphragm does. Tell me what the alveoli does. The bronchi, the lungs, the nose, the mouth, the pharynx, the larynx. Tell me what do they do. Okay. All right. So that's the first part, is explaining that. Okay, in a diagram. The second part of your assignment is to research a respiratory illness or disease. Now, we mentioned in the video not to do COVID-19, which is a virus, but it affects the respiratory system, which we'll eventually talk about that later in the year, as we're still gathering more information on this disease, okay, or this virus, I should say. But I want you to focus on a respiratory illness, and I'll provide you some examples of them, all right, that you could research, okay? One would be, you may have it, maybe somebody in your family may have it, asthma. It affects your breathing, right? You ever see somebody with an inhaler that they need to take an inhalation of that to get them some air, right, to their lungs. So somebody has asthma, all right? Asthma is one of them. Another one would be pneumonia. Pneumonia is another illness that affects the respiratory system, kind of related with somebody who may have this COVID-19 as well too, okay? So pneumonia was another one called cystic fibrosis. You might have heard of that one too. Maybe somebody you knew and had that in their family, or it's a really scary one, because a lot of people have it. They have a lot of mucus and they have to get the mucus kind of sucked out of their lungs. So they have a problem breathing because they have their lungs are filled with mucus. All right, so that's another type of respiratory illness or disease. Lung cancer would be another one there. Emphysema. So these are some ones that you could do for your research, and you could find other ones too. Okay, you could research other respiratory illnesses or diseases, and you are to give me a research page on that paragraph, at least a half page of information on the information of the respiratory illness that you came up with, how it works, maybe what kind of symptoms somebody might have with this, what was maybe their life expectancy, how long can they live, how what can they do to help cure that type of illness. So come up with some of the symptoms and treatments and information that you researched on that respiratory illness. All right, looks like we have a question here. It says, does your rib cage protect your lungs too? Yes, your rib cage protects your lungs. Yes, that's exactly what they do. Okay, that keeps over your lung area. So I think that was Isabella. Good job. All right. All right. Any other questions that you may have? And then there's also a brain pop assigned for this week too. So don't forget, I just uploaded that before we came in on the session here. So you have a brain pop due Friday. watch the video, 10 questions and vocabulary with that. The vocabulary will be some vocabulary that I'll have on Microsoft Teams. I'm going to put on Microsoft Teams this afternoon. I'll have the outline of what you should be doing for the project, and some of the vocabulary words that will kind of go along with your diagram. So you're drawing a picture with your diagram with the vocabulary words that kind of go to those areas, and also the research of your respiratory illness, the type of illness that you're going to research on the respiratory system. All right, go ahead, Isabel. Looks like you have a question, so go ahead, fire away there. If you have a question, you can just write it in the space bar there, or the live chat. I'm just giving you guys some examples, some ideas, things that you could do. Okay, so do we have to do a type of illness? It has to, yes, it has to be a respiratory illness. I just was kind of going over some of those with you guys right now. Okay, like I said, cystic fibrosis is one. Another one would be asthma, emphysema, lung cancer. Okay, these are just ideas of them. Okay, you could Google, you could research, you just type in respiratory illnesses or disease, and a whole bunch of them will come up. But I'm giving you some of the common ones that you may have heard of before, especially asthma. You've probably heard of asthma. You've probably heard of lung cancer. You've probably heard of pneumonia. Cystic fibrosis and emphysema are some of the other common respiratory illnesses. These respiratory illnesses are problems with people that have a problem breathing. They're affecting your breathing system, which we're learning about with taking in air, getting rid of air, the gas exchange within the lungs, what the trachea does is the windpipe, what the bronchi does, okay, or the branches that go into the lungs. So we're kind of covering these parts and how they work. All right, looks like Vicente, is that a question there too? Brain pop is also due Friday, okay? Brain pop is due Friday, so that's how these projects and brain pops are going to kind of work the same way. So I'm always going to sign them on Monday, most likely these projects, and then they're going to be due Friday. So you'll have like 4 or 5 days to work on everything that you have. Okay, plus me talking about the lesson itself, like going over the respiratory system, over some of the facts and some of the main parts and keys that you need to know, key information. All right. So you got that? Okay, good. Looks like Isabel has another question. So we have to write a page about, yes. So yes, at least don't give me as much information as you can. Okay, I'm not looking for 2 or 3 page paper or anything like that, but give me as much information that you can get on each one of these. I'm not going to tell you how much or how little to write, but I'd say at least a paragraph is what, 4 to 6 more. I was saying like 6 to 8 sentences. So explaining what the illness does. Okay. Yes, and draw a picture of the respiratory system labeled. Okay, labeled with the parts. If you want to put color in it, that's fine. You take a picture of these, both of these, send it to me in one email or 2 separate, or just do one each. Do your respiratory on one page and then do your research on another. That's fine with me. Okay, yeah, I would do that. I would draw your picture on one side of the paper, backside, write your research on that. So just take a picture, 2 pictures, and send it to me for this week, along with the brain pop. Okay. All right, we'll see if you guys have been paying attention here. I'm going to kind of go over, we'll just talk about some of the vocabulary here, and please just try to answer the correct answer. Just type your answer on the space bar there. So let me just kind of give a little review with you guys here, just like do a little question and answer activity with you guys here. So I'm going to kind of, I'll say the vocabulary word or the key part and see if you can get the answer. This is known as the oxygen delivery system. What system are we talking about? It's basically the oxygen delivery system. What system are we studying right now? Should be an easy question. Another name for this system is the oxygen delivery system because it delivers oxygen throughout our body, right? And what system are we studying? All you gotta do is type that answer in the live chat bar. All right, good job, Isabella. The respiratory system, that was an easy one right there. All right, let me go through some of the other ones that I might have for you, just as I presented some of this information, so hopefully you paid attention. So we'll see if you got this. This is another name for inspiration, drawing gas into the lungs. When you go, we call that what? Inspiration draws gas into the lungs. What would that be called? Yeah, you got it too, Vicente. Good job. Vicente and Isabella, nice job on the last question. It was the respiratory system. Good job. All right, so this is the inspiration that draws gas into the lungs. What do we call that when you go inspiration that draws gas into the lungs? Yes, very good. Inhaling or inhalation, very good. Opposite of inhalation, we call that what? When we force gases out of the lungs, when we go, what is that called? Opposite of inhalation forces the gas, the carbon dioxide, out of our lungs. What do we call that? Good job. Both of you guys got that last one, Isabella and Vicente. So when we go, what is that called when we push that carbon dioxide out from that gas exchange? Opposite of inhalation. Exhaling, very good, or in exhalation, either or. Okay, good job, Isabella, on answering that one there. Okay, all right. What is another name for the throat? We learned it in the last body system and digestive. All right, as air passes through from into your mouth and then the nasal cavity and it hits the back of your throat. What's another name for it? The scientific name for it, the one we learned from the last unit. What's another name for the throat? Scientific name for the throat. It's one that you've learned from the last system. I'll give you a clue. It starts with the letter P. Okay, not the trachea or esophagus. It's called the pharynx. Okay, it's the throat area. Okay, it's the pharynx. It's not the trachea or esophagus. So the pharynx is commonly called the throat. Okay, and it's the common pathway of food and air. You did say esophagus. It kind of works with the esophagus, but it's not that. All right. What is the next one here? The next organ that I have here is called the windpipe. Another name for the windpipe is called what? What is the name for the windpipe called? It's a pipe that goes down. It's a flexible tube called a windpipe. What do we call that one? I believe you said it in the last one there, Isabella. Well, of the two, you wrote two of them down there. So what is a flexible tube? Good try, Vicente. It's not the esophagus. It is the trachea. It is the trachea. It's a flexible tube, but they kind of work with the esophagus, okay? And the fact that the esophagus and the larynx are actually kind of together there, but it's a flexible tube called the windpipe is the trachea. How about this one right here? It's called another name for the voice box. What's the one that's the name for a voice box? Where the vocal cords sit for your respiratory system, where it's going to produce sound when you talk or you sing. Okay, good job. I see you put trachea in the last one there. Isabella, that was correct. Good job. So what is the one it's called the voice box or the vocal cord? It's just below the pharynx, which was the throat. Then it goes that area. Then it goes to the trachea, which we already stated. Very good. The vocal cords. Excellent. It's the vocal cords. So that's what that's called there. Good job. All right, your vocal cords. All right, the vocal cords, or is also called the larynx, is the name for it. Okay, that's what I was looking for, was the larynx. So the voice box or vocal cords is the larynx. Okay, good job. All right. All right, let me go through a couple other ones here. All right, this area of the respiratory system, um, it has two lobes on one side and three on the other. Okay, two lobes on the left side, three lobes on the right side, and this is basically the main organ where gas is going to exchange in this area. Okay, and what is this called? They are conical shape. Okay, and like I said, there's two lobes on the left side, three on the right side. What are they called? Okay, we got Chris in here. Hi, Chris. How are you? Thanks for joining in. We're just doing a question and answer part right now of this respiratory system. So what is that called? This is their conical shape. This is where gas is exchanged in this area. All right, there's two lobes on the left side and three on the right side. These are probably the most important part of the whole respiratory system itself. What are they called? All right, good job. Looks like Isabella had that one. The lungs. Good job. All right, so do you remember which side of the lungs have two lobes? Your left or your right? Which side has two lobes? Your left or your right side of the lung? Which side has two lobes versus the other? Okay, your right has two. Okay, very good. The right side of your lungs. Actually, you know what? The left side of your lungs there. You think the other opposite. I know. Your left have two lobes. Your right have three. Okay, your right have three. All right, excellent. Okay, the next function here of the cardiovascular system here. I mean, respiratory system. Getting ahead of myself. Cardiovascular will be probably for next week here. Okay, these are branches from the trachea to the lungs. What are those branches called? They spread out as branches, and that's where the air is going to kind of go in next into the lungs. What are they called? Those branches from the trachea to the lungs. What are those branches called? From the trachea to the lung. Where air is going to go from the trachea, they go into these branches into both sides, right and left lobes of your lungs. What are those called? Okay, these systems of branches or pipes are called. Anyone want to try and answer what they are called? Just I'm waiting on somebody wants to give it a try. From the trachea to the lungs. These branches or pipes of tubes that kind of connect in. What is that? What is that organ called? in the respiratory system. Yes, very good. The bronchi, very good. The bronchi are those areas. Very good. The bronchi. All right, good job answering that. All right. Um, the next part would be inside the bronchi or bronchus, there's this other organ, and it's probably the most important organ where this is where the gas exchange takes place between the air and the blood. All right, what is that called? They're little sacs from the air to the blood. This is where the oxygen and carbon dioxide are going to take place. What are those called? So good job, Isabella. You got that last one. All right, on the bronchi. So what is it called for the next part there, where the gas exchange in those sacs inside the bronchi? They're small. They're circular. That's where the carbon dioxide and oxygen are going to exchange, and it helps out with the blood capillaries of going into the to your veins and arteries along with the heart there. Okay, you're not sure? Okay, that's a good try. It's a little tough one. I did mention it earlier. It's called the alveoli. 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 It's hard to say. It's a these are small little sacs on the bronchi, okay, and they work in a gas exchange that takes place. So that's where it's important. It's important that the air in the alveoli and the blood and the capillaries are very close together. So oxygen and carbon dioxide can move between them. Okay, so when you breathe in, air comes down the trachea through the bronchi to the alveoli, and the fresh air has lots of oxygen in it. So some of the oxygen will travel across walls of the alveoli into your bloodstream. So that's how it gets oxygen to your bloodstream as well. So traveling in opposite direction is carbon dioxide, so which crosses with the blood capillaries into the air as alveoli and then breathed out. Okay, and this way you bring in into your body the oxygen you need to live and get rid of waste products of carbon dioxide. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I'm going to cover some of the main organs there of the system. I'll just be on the lookout for the Microsoft Teams page. I'll provide some of the information on your project there, which will be due Friday, which you'll have the whole week to get this completed. Oh, the other one I'd like to mention too. All right, this is a flat muscle underneath the lungs. When you breathe, it goes up and down. If you remember that one, that's another important one too. If you can answer that one there before we wrap up for today. It's a flat muscle underneath the rib cage, underneath your lungs and the rib cage. When you breathe in and breathe out, it goes up and down. What is that called? When you breathe in and out, it goes up and down. It's a flat muscle underneath. It's a voluntary muscle. It's usually going automatically when you breathe. You're breathing nonstop. Okay? You don't think to breathe, it just happens. It's voluntary. Okay? So when you're doing that, that muscle goes up and down underneath the lungs, protected by your rib cage. What is that muscle known as? It's a flat muscle. It's large. It's kind of curved a little bit. It's at the bottom part of the cavity of your chest wall. What is that called? The diaphragm. Good job, Isabella. Yep, that's the diaphragm. So that's another main one there too. So make sure you look that one over as well too. So the ones I just covered with you guys, those are some of the main organs there. Your lungs, your diaphragm, the bronchi, the alveoli, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, your nose cavity, your mouth. These are all the main functions of the respiratory system and how they work, okay, and what they do. So make sure you put that in your diagram, your picture, label them, and tell me what they do. And don't forget on the other side, you could be doing your research on a respiratory illness. Okay. Like I said, asthma, cystic fibrosis, pneumonia, lung cancer. Those are all respiratory illnesses or diseases. Remember not to do anything with COVID-19 because COVID-19 is a virus. We didn't get into viruses. We'll do something like that maybe towards the end of the year as we're still gathering more information on COVID-19. Okay? All right. So any other questions? Brain Pop 2 will be due Friday. So both will be due Friday. So you have the rest of the week to work on this stuff. I'll be back on Wednesday. On Wednesday, I'll talk about more of some. I'll review some of these parts that we went over, and I'll probably talk about some of the other respiratory illnesses, the ones I mentioned. I'll probably give you some more detail on there, so you could understand what some of those might be on Wednesday when I'm back live on Wednesday. I'll still be live one more time today at 5 to 6 o'clock. I'm back on live as well. Okay, so we'll be back during that time. There's only about 3 people in here right now, so just asking if you have any more questions. Or just under 15 minutes remaining in here. So this is the time to ask if you have anything about the project, anything about what's due. Um, keep up looking at your grades. Whatever you don't have, they're going to go in as zeros as a placeholder for now. Okay, until they're turned in. So I'm still giving everyone extra time to do it, but please turn it in by the due date. That's what we're trying to have you guys do and follow in those directions. Okay. Okay, any other questions in here before we wrap up for today? So we only have 2 people in here and just about 10 minutes remain. So any other questions on the respiratory system? Okay, well, there's no more questions here. I'm going to end this session a little bit early. Like I said, there's only 2 people in here at this moment, unless you don't have any questions. So it looks like I communicated with Isabella, Christopher, Gus, Vicente, and Kyle in here for the afternoon session. So hopefully, if you're one of you guys in here, thank you for participating for today and asking that. Okay, looks like Isabella says, no, I think I'm good. Thank you for the lesson. Okay, excellent. Thanks, Isabella. Thanks for partaking in today. Nice job with answering those questions. So, and staying on for the review part of that as well. And if you have any questions with the project, you could always email me and or send me a message through Microsoft Teams. Okay. All right, Isabella, good seeing you and good communicating with you. If you could sign off anytime, anybody else that's done for today, just so I could see who's in here. So, good job. All right, goodbye, Isabella. Have a good afternoon. Okay, well, I'm going to sign off early here. If there's, like I said, there's only two people in here. If you don't have any other questions, like I said, you can email me and communicate me through with email. But I'll be back on at 5 to 6 o'clock tonight. If you have any more questions about the project or anything that you want to discuss on the respiratory system that you might not understand, we could communicate that way as well too. All right, I'm going to be signing off for this afternoon, guys, and be back on here at 5 o'clock. All right, have a great day. We'll see you then. All right, bye.